I'd now like to ask Gloria to come, and in particular, Gloria worked with Geoffrey at Royal Holloway, both as a colleague, but then wrote with him for a long time before that as well.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be here this afternoon talking about a project I did with Geoffrey, and also talking about our work together in leadership in the School of Business and Management at Royal Holloway. But Geoffrey and I go back a very long way. He often called me his first academic friend, because we're working together in Thames Valley University, which is now University of West London. And we were the two academics interested in research. Everybody else was interested in making sure we got the ACCA accreditation, making sure we help students pass CIMA and the professional exams. But Geoffrey and I were, Geoffrey, of course, was leading the charge with research, and then he corralled me into it. He said, one thing I remember him saying is that it's the research that keeps you young, Gloria. And that's a typical Geoffrey, sharing his views about how to progress your career and everything, things that I'm going to be talking about in this presentation. Interestingly, the very first paper we wrote was in 1998, and it was in a paper on accounting education. We had carried out some sort of experiments with students, and we wrote it up. And I mean, that was the very first time that we worked together. The project that we worked on was in a project we worked on NGO accountability in Ghana between 2006 and 2017, or 2017 was the final paper we wrote together. And it was with Brendan Odwaya. Brendan is going to be speaking, myself and a colleague in Ghana. And I remember being at the airport with Geoffrey. You have these television screens showing different places that flights coming in. He said, "Gloria, where's Ouagadougou?" I said, it's in Burkina Faso. Then he said, "Where's Burkina Faso?" I said, it used to be called Upper Volta. It's right up just north of Ghana. And that was Geoffrey. Geoffrey was always a lot of fun. He was always prepared to share things and ask questions. And one of the questions he asked me was, "Why won't you let me eat street food?" I said, "Well, no, I'm protecting you. I don't want any issues with your tummy or anything here. Let's just have fun. Okay, if you smell something you want it, we'll make it at home for you. Okay, but not street food." So the project, Improving the Effectiveness of NGO Accountability, was a project funded by the ACCA. We carried out the work in 2006, 2007, 2008, and provided a report in 2009. I mean, I got into this project with Geoffrey and Brendan. They'd been working together on accountability, NGO accountability for a while. By the way, itching to do some case study work in an environment outside the developed country. They've been looking at NGO work, a lot of work in Ireland mainly, and they wanted to look outside developed country. So we developed this project looking at investigating the effectiveness and the impact of our NGO accountability mechanisms at grassroots level. Because a lot of the work they've been looking at office funding level, and not so much work at the grassroots or beneficiaries. Prior to doing this work, of course, they had been looking at advocacy NGOs, and this work brought us into development NGOs. And throughout the project, we were worried about, what do we as accountants know about development? We haven't studied development. So what do we know? And there's a lot of literature in the development literature about the work of NGOs, but not about accountability. So I think that's where our main emphasis was going to be. So we went to Ghana, and the first stage of the project, we worked in, if you like, head office. the capital. In the capital, we visited the NGO main offices, headquarters offices in Accra. So there's the three of us, and then our young man that we had who was helping us with translation and everything. This was a Dutch NGO. We ended up we interviewed Dutch NGOs, Danish NGOs, British NGOs, quite a few. I mean, I think we ended up doing about 30 interviews in headquarters in Accra. We did 8, but most of the work was done up in the north, in the villages. So we went to the village. Jeffrey didn't want to spend the 12 hours driving through the country. So we took a 45-minute flight into Tamale. And there's Brendan. This is in 2007 when Brendan joined us. This was a focus group interview because we were interested in hearing the voice of the people at the grassroots. We're interested in hearing the voices of beneficiaries. So we asked our questions, and of course we had the young man doing the translation for us and getting responses. Theoretically, over time, Brendan and Jeffrey had developed the ideas of hierarchical accountability and holistic accountability. Hierarchical accountability, of course, is reporting upwards through from the field officers to the country managers and then to the funders. And there's a lot of work that has looked at that. It's your typical accountant's type accountability, where we have a prescribed report or prescribed format, and you account for monies received and how the monies were spent. Focus a lot on efficiency and on outcomes. Basically, quantitative reports supplemented with a bit of narratives. Jeffrey and Brendan, in developing these theoretical ideas, felt there was a need for holistic accountability, where you're not just reporting upwards to funders, but actually you're recognizing that the work of the NGO impacts many people, many stakeholders, and therefore we need to be accountable to all stakeholders, upwards to donors, but also downwards to beneficiaries. Thinking about accountabilities to funders, field workers, beneficiaries, and managers, using multi-directional approaches, or both formal and informal ways of finding out how funds have been used and what the benefits have been. Of course, I mean, accountability is complex. It is complex, and loads of people have written about accountability. I mean, I think one article that was really very insightful was one by Sinclair in 1995, when she talks about the chameleon of accountability, that it's something that is always changing. Then Morgan in 2000 talking about accountability as something that's constantly changing and expanding. Yeah, the key issues of accountability for what, by whom, it seems to be the core. And there's a sense of accountability as actually reporting back, and to some extent external control, and also, of course, ensuring that the performance of the organization is improved, is managed. What Jeffrey and Brendan, my work, tended to show that it's accountability includes that, but it's even more than that. Okay, key accountability contributions from our research. That upward accountability is problematic. You only get one side of the story, and to some extent, our respondents, the people we interviewed, has told us it was really leading to external coercive control, controlling what they did and how they did things. Our analysis showed that accountability, upward accountability in the sense of it being coercive, often led to inappropriate unintended questions, unintended consequences. If you have an inappropriate accountability mechanism that's just focusing on how much did you receive and what did you do with it, some of the nuances get lost. For example, our respondents told us that they told the funders what they wanted to hear because they were scared of losing funding. There's a fear of funding being curtailed. So actually, they were being quite strategic in the sorts of things they told them. An example being that, well, we trained so many children. And what they didn't tell them was that they had to feed the children as well before the children would come to school. They were tactical in the sorts of responses that they gave to the funders. And a lot of times, the local context was downplayed. The local context, of course, is what's setting the situation, helping what may have an impact on the actual performance. But that was downplayed. The funders had a list of performance indicators that they were interested in, and of course, the officers provided those performance indicators, but they felt that those performance indicators were not the right performance indicators to tell you about the work of the NGO. The NGO's officers operated in different ways, and there was a sense of the accountability, the upward formal accountability that they engaged in. But also more important to them was they felt accountable, and so they did things that they needed to do in order to achieve the mission. From our work, I mean, we came to the conclusion that NGO accountability is an important concept, or accountability as a whole is an important concept because it impacts on people's lives. In our work with the beneficiaries, we came across the rights-based approach that some of the NGOs were using, would help to empower these beneficiaries, gave them a voice to explain their feelings, their responses, their problems. And that's important because it's in the downward accountability. It's in the rights-based approach that you are able to really influence what you're trying to, or achieve what you're trying to achieve with the funding. One of the papers we wrote was called Seeking Conversations for Accountability, because our work suggested that that's what the NGO field workers and were looking for. They wanted conversations. They wanted to be able to talk freely about their work and the gains they were getting, and the problems that they were facing. So they were demanding more informal and more social approaches to accountability, more so than the formalized quantitative reports that they were giving through the upward accountability. Reciprocity was something that was very important to them because often the founders were demanding to know what you have spent money on, but the founders were not explaining to them why they needed that information. So through our work, we got really rich understanding of the groundwork of NGOs and the necessity for feedback, the necessity to give officers and the beneficiaries opportunities for learning. So I think from our work, the statement that it's accountability is an important concept, especially when we think about how it impacts people's lives. Where to identify the contributions, I think Onuman and Odwaya were pioneers of NGO accountability research. They explain downward, upward accountability. They help to explain the complexities associated with NGO work. as a result of the introduction of this into the accounting literature, have a lot of work, stream of work that has been developed by younger academics as they push the area forward. Unuman and Adwaya have been guest editors on, with several journals looking at NGO accountability. We've written many academic papers, their book chapters. And interestingly, there's a lot of practitioner activity as well as a result of this work. I want to switch and look at Geoffrey as a manager at Royal Holloway, and then somehow link the two, accountability and Geoffrey as a manager. Geoffrey was the head of school from 2011 to 2016. During that period, the department grew significantly from 50 to 100 academics, doubled in 5 years. But he introduced several, or he was significant in managing several changes within the school, and that's the university college level. He introduced into the school transnational education, whereby we have academics teaching in Royal Holloway, but then flying also to Singapore to offer the degree in Singapore. And that was a hard thing to introduce in the school. Academics, as Sandra said, love to complain, do not like change. But Geoffrey was able to institute that and get that acceptance. He also introduced, the college introduced a teaching career pathway. And Geoffrey was able to embed this in the school. Just as there's a dichotomy between accounting and finance, in most university departments, you have your teachers who are the non-researchers and the researchers. And the teachers often are looked, or they feel that they're looked down upon by the researchers. But Geoffrey was able to embed this within the school, such that the career teachers are just as welcomed as the researchers. And of course, he fostered a very rich research environment to the extent that in the 2014 ref, we ended up 29th out of the 101 business school. Well, that's Geoffrey as a manager, but as others have said, Geoffrey actually was a leader, and management and leadership, I think, are different. And it's in his leadership that perhaps we saw accountability in action. The fact that he was very transparent in his decision making. Everything was explained and justified. There was reciprocity. You could ask why, and you would get a reasoned explanation. He introduced value-based leadership to the extent that intellectual curiosity became a key value that we all coalesced around. Apart from intellectual curiosity, the encouragement of knowledge and developing yourself, he also introduced the idea of diversity and inclusivity as something we should value. The idea of collegiality, making it actually work. A lot of departments talk about we are collegial, but actually they're not very collegial. But Geoffrey was able somehow to embed collegiality within the school. He created a nurturing environment. Early career researchers felt valued. Similarly, middle career researchers were pushed. Senior academics were encouraged to take on leadership roles. So he was able really to put accountability in action. But more than that, he was inspirational. He maintained his research. During that period, he became, he gained the Distinguished Accountant Academic Award that Lisa mentioned this morning. During that period, he earned prizes for the best guest editorship, the best reviewer. He earned many accolades and awards. He didn't give up his research because he was doing the hard grind of being a head of school. He developed talent and supported young people to help them achieve their career goals. So what can we say about Geoffrey? And I saw this statement in a tribute Brendan wrote about Geoffrey. And I thought it was really quite poignant. Geoffrey's academic legacy is exemplary. But more important, he's obsessed with making a difference to practice and policy. And we heard that this morning. We heard that his work with the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Wales. We also heard about the work of CSER and the work with BAFA. So practice, working to make a difference to people's lives. And I think that was the core of Geoffrey. He wanted to make a difference to people's lives in whatever little way he had. And the challenge for us, of course, as researchers and academic leaders, is to continue this in order to celebrate Geoffrey's life. Thank you.